What is up, hotties? Welcome back to another episode of Stay Hot. I'm Blaiden Kirk, joined as always by my two favorite co-hosts of all time, Matthew Sponhour and Theo Ash, and it is finally our favorite time of year, other than the NFL season. It's NFL draft season. And while Matt and Theo are kind of leaning in and out of frame right now, I'll just kind of describe to you what this episode is going to be about. Today we're ranking not really ranking, but we're talking about some of the top edge rushers in this upcoming NFL draft class. We might throw together a top 5 towards the end here, but we're just going to talk about some of the top guys: Abdul Carter, Mykel Williams, James Pearce, etc., etc. So if you have an edge rusher that you really like, we might talk about him in this episode. If your team really needs an edge rusher and you want to know who they should be drafting, then you're really going to want to listen to this episode. But before we get into all of these edge rusher conversations, Matt, Theo, how are you guys doing on this beautiful Sunday afternoon? This is the earliest Sunday record we've had in 20 weeks?
And it's a blessing. I love it, dude. One thing I really can't stand is staying up until 1 a.m. during the NFL season. It really does suck. I forgot how much it sucked until today. I'm like, oh my God, I could go to bed at 11. And I have been going to bed earlier because I've been doing more cardio at the gym. And I've been sleeping better. It's all coming together. And I haven't been on my phone nearly at all today. And I was reading early. You see, it's all starting to come together. And I'm going to go to like
together, Matt. And
I'm scouting out the coffee shops around my apartment soon.
And you're going to
I'm locking in. So no, I won't read it though.
Carefully to what Matt has to say about these edge rushers, because clearly he's got it all figured out.
I don't have it all figured out, but I got a little bit figured out on the edge rushers. I have some strong takes on a few of them. Sometimes you watch a guy and you're like, yeah, he's not my guy, but he's not my guy. And sometimes you're like, this guy's a demon, or I know I'm going to get into a fight about this player on the pod. Yeah. So
I'm already fighting people about the Georgia edge rusher Williams, not the other one.
That's going to be a war for you. I saw you tweet out about it. And I'm like, yeah, because that guy didn't produce a ton, and anytime you suggest somebody should be top 5 who didn't have like a ton of production, it's going to be a little bit of a war, especially when you have like Carter, who everybody is already so in on at the same position. And we'll get into him. I'm sure he's one of the top guys.
I have so much to say, but we'll hold off on him for a bit. But yeah, it's kind of an interesting class. I don't know where you guys land on it as a whole. I actually don't think there's too many like really high-end players. I'm not quite maybe as high on this edge class as some people, but that's kind of always my MO, is poo-pooing everything and saying actually. I think there's like good bottom of the first round talent and then good top of the first round talent, but there's not like a wide bevy of kind of middle pieces for me, but that's just me personally.
I don't know. I think I'm kind of comparing it to last year, and I'm saying, oh my God, I love this class so much more than last year's. And I just think there's greater depth. I mean, even the 10th guy, I'm like, okay, I see what their role could be. Whereas last year, I can't even remember who all was in the class.
Latu, Verse, Turner. Latu is so good for us last year. Yes. And then like Verse and Turner, they were cool. And then like after that, it got horrible fast.
It got really bleak after
like,
those.
There was just so many edge rushers that could not play. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's why I felt like, it was important to get kind of overdraft maybe those first guys, because like, man, there was just a bad year for depth. And then of course, Verse ended up being like all pro.
Yeah, he's a demon
caliber.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's so good.
I don't think that he can just bull rush everybody all the time.
And then he did.
Exactly
what he did. And he was really good at it.
Yeah.
How are you doing, Theo?
Oh, I'm doing all right. I don't have too much to report. I was playing the iPhone mobile game Tiny Wings a lot this week.
Video.
I sent a 4-minute video of me completing an entire run. It was like iPhone Game of the Year in like 2011, and I've been on that shit, man. That's such a good.
There you go.
It's a lot cleaner than like a Subway Surfers, but really I shouldn't blow up the spot because it definitely would lend itself to like TikTok, like split screen gameplay. it looks so much nicer than the like videos you usually see for that, while being just as simple. So I've been grinding on tiny wings. If our younger audience doesn't know and wants to, grind on a mobile game. I don't know how many kids play mobile games these days like that, like we did.
Kids still play mobile games.
I still play a couple.
I saw you on Clash Royale at the Super Bowl, Blaiden.
I was on Clash of Clans. Let's get that straight.
Oh.
I've never played Clash Royale. Clash of Clans.
I've never played Clash Royale my own personal self. And I never really was that into Clash of Clans. Not that I didn't game on my phone.
I was into Clash of Clans for like a week, and one time my mom like put in her credit card information on my phone to like let me buy a game or something. I don't know what it was for, but it saved that information on my phone. It wasn't just a one-time thing. And usually when I had bought things on the iTunes store, I needed a gift card, like gift card money.
Right, of course.
And my account was at 0, and I still tried to buy something, and it worked. I was like, there's a glitch. I've got infinite money. And I like upgraded my town hall from like 1 to like 50 in one day, because I thought it was just a glitch that they were letting me exploit. I was like, I have 0 in my account, and it's still letting me buy everything. And my mom was like, did you spend...
How much did you end up dropping?
Like $200, I think.
200 bones.
It wasn't like something unbelievably crazy. And I think she called Game Freak and was like, my idiot son.
My dumb son thought it glitched.
And I think they refunded her, and I got to keep all my stuff. So really it was an infinite money glitch the whole time. But I genuinely thought I had like infinite money on the App Store for like 24 hours.
All right.
But then
I
after that,
max Town Hall 9 in Clash of Clans. I upgraded to Town Hall 10 recently, and I've been trying to max that out. So
congratulations.
You could just buy
a bunch
of
use
upgrades.
This TikTok money to upgrade my Town Hall and buy a bunch of gems.
That's what I did.
Go crazy.
Worked like a charm, and then call and say, my idiot son. And then
that's true. My idiot son. But you want to talk about some football?
Yeah, let's do it. Who's the first edge rusher on the consensus
you know who
board?
the first edge rusher is. It's Abdul Carter, man, and deservedly so. He is very, very good. Very, very good. Future Cleveland Browns legend Abdul Carter, some are saying. Theo, you've been watching him a good bit. I know you were watching him, I think, while we were at the Super Bowl a little bit before we went to Super Bowl. What have you found that really sticks out that makes him the clear number one edge in this class?
Well, I don't think it's as clear as everybody else, but okay. I do think he's number one. And the thing that stands out is, well, a couple things. He has been productive since he was a freshman at Penn State. Like, he just came in rocking the number 11, which is their special number that they give all the great players. And he was playing off the ball then, but still a crazy productive pass rusher whenever they sent him downhill. And he was kind of playing that spy, like blitzing piece, that kind of downhill type of backer. He wasn't much of a coverage guy, but, you know, he had that crazy sideline to sideline range, and he was just, you know, fast as hell. He's someone I was on record planting my flag on before last season, just like, who is this number 11 guy for Penn State? Like, he's clearly special. And when you get a guy like that before they're even ready to declare for the draft, like they usually just age well. And he's one of those guys who's been stamped from the beginning. He is so fast. He's so explosive. He can bend. He's a freak. He can bend and turn a tight corner, obviously. But what I like the most about him is he can turn a tight corner through heavy contact. And
right. His contact
balance is nice. And he just takes these like big strides as guys are pushing on him. And it doesn't always look the cleanest, but he always manages to pop out on the other side and get production. So he is somebody who, you know, if you had to bet on any player in this class to get double-digit sacks or, you know, set some sort of record his rookie season, like, he's got the most juice to do that easily, just as a basic overview.
Yeah, I think you hit on it well. And he's a guy who I think does a good job setting himself up to win with certain moves. You know, there's a lot of guys who can threaten outside and bend the corner. At least in this class, I thought there's a decent number of guys. I'm like, okay,
Yeah,
I can see it. But he's somebody who sets himself up outside and then can rip through and win inside, and who can fake inside and then go outside. I thought his change of direction is also very elite. Maybe that's kind of in the bend category, but it's sort of a different thing where his ability to stop and start is really good, and that makes him really tough to deal with. So when we talk about Carter as an athlete as far as movement goes, it's really like every aspect of it that you could think of. Some guys are just fast. Some guys can bend well. Some guys can change directions. He can do it all in terms of like his mobility, and that's what makes it so tough.
Yeah, he's got ridiculous straight line speed and side to side speed. I mean, it's some of the most jaw dropping reps of him are ones where he doesn't even make the play, but like the running back is bursted out, you know, up the middle or something, and he's on the edge. And like his ability to just like turn around and start pursuing that guy is like he just eats up so much space with each stride. Like, man, he can really move. And he hit and I like you bringing up the inside counters, Matt. He's definitely got those in his bag. He had a spin move against UCLA in a game I just watched that was wicked, like picking up like both his feet off the ground at one point during the spin and like just contorting his ankles while batting down the punch of the guy who thought he was going to have to go out with him. Like, to be able to move like that and turn back in, it's what do you even do at that point? It's, you know, you can only really sell out to stop one thing with him. And when he starts to put all of that together, it just becomes so unstoppable. And yeah, it's the same thing heading inside. Like you're worried about him just slithering through the gap like he does. And then
exactly.
You start to slide in and try to close that B. And then he bends the corner like he always does. It just, the geometry of it, he really understands. And I think he's got a little bit of physicality to him. I wish there was more from a bull rushing perspective and from a power perspective, but I did see a little bit of it. And the boys,
he's not some huge negative in terms of power. Like he wins with his speed and his quickness and his athleticism in that regard, but he's probably not going to be a dude who's consistently like winning with bull rushes or power or being like a strength advantage versus other NFL like offensive tackles. But it's not something that I have as like a huge negative for him until we get to the point where we're looking at him as like, okay, well, this guy might be the first overall pick. Where does he stack up against like Myles Garrett, right? Which is like, and like those level of prospects. And it's like, okay, well, here's why he isn't that level of guy and why it's not unquestionable that he's going to go number one.
Yeah, I don't think he has to be that good of a power rusher either, just because to me he is so flexible, and it's like he's almost like Rubber Man. I can't even describe like the movement that Theo, you talk about all the time, rare body types and rare movers. Like this guy moves in such a unique way. Like some of the times where he's able to stop and start, like you guys have mentioned, it's like the way he like gets down into almost like a lunging position and then is able to like change direction that way. It's just like, dude, I've never seen anyone else move that way as a pass rusher. Like I've seen people compare him to Micah Parsons. I'm like, Micah Parsons doesn't move like that. Micah Parsons is a crazy mover. He doesn't move like that. So it's just like, and you could tell right away that the versatility, you mentioned he's played off-ball backer before. It's obvious from the first time you watch, and it's like, okay, yeah, this guy can play all over the field. Anything you really need him to do, you know, from within that front seven role, he can probably do it at a pretty high level. I
wouldn't want him inside like 3 technique or 4
maybe not. Yeah, maybe
like
not.
He can move. I think you could put him off the ball and have him be okay.
Yeah.
But he doesn't quite have the inside out versatility that matters.
That's true.
I think like Trayvon Walker
did. He could very well play like the TJ Watt role to a pretty high level, I think.
Just lining up at the same spot.
line up outside. I mean, he lines up outside, but this year a lot you saw him, you know, kind of it wasn't just like screaming off the edge every play. So I think just kind of like having that flexibility to like either stay or go, and being able to pick his spots, because I think he's also a really smart player. Like he's got really nice awareness, and he kind of feel out the play really well a lot of times.
You've got to be, I mean, maybe it's, I don't know if you want to call this IQ or you want to call it reaction, but any pass rusher who can like take one step and recognize what the tackle's doing and then counter accordingly in 1 to 2 steps, whatever that is, he's got it. And that definitely allows him to do other things. Like if you want to drop him into coverage, he's got the athleticism. I think he certainly has just the recognition talent to go and turn that into whatever. I really like him. I think a dude like this existing, and then maybe a guy like, I don't know, some big, end, which there's a bunch of big edges listed in this class, is what makes it so hard to be a tackle, because I don't know how you could be 310 pounds like you need to be as a tackle and 6'6", and then deal with this guy who is fast and can bend like he can and can deal with contact like he can. So you really have to get your hands fully on him if you want to stop him, but is also able to pull out like the hezzy at the perfect time and break in. It's just really, really difficult against this dude. So I'm a big fan.
Yeah, definitely a big fan of his pass rush ability. One of my favorite games from him is the Notre Dame game, and that playoff game, his left arm, I just don't think it was working really. He hurt it the week before, and obviously a playoff game, he kind of rushed back. And so with his left arm not working, they aligned him to the left side. So the right tackle is on his right arm. And he just ran the hoop on that guy like over and over and over and over again. So like he was just engaging that right arm, ripping through, and his left one was just kind of like flailing and useless. And it's like 3/4 of just spankings. Like he didn't get it now when you run it that many times, there are a couple reps where the tackle gets him and pushes him too far up the arc and he goes down. But the amount of times that he won doing that over the course of the game, like, was pretty spectacular. Like just the fact that can kind of be his only plan for 3/4 and have it work as many times as like forced a fumble. And it's such a dangerous thing when a edge rusher disappears behind the quarterback and is able to loop back. I mean, so many times that results in fumbles and like these blindside hits and big sacks. So like his ability to do that. And then in the fourth quarter, like I think he'd been saving it all game, but then he started to mix it up a little bit. Like even in that game where his arm was not really working, it's like he didn't just do the outside track. He did a lot of it for 3/4. And then in that last quarter, he was, working a bit more to the inside, doing the hesitation. So like he's got that IQ of like, yeah, I'm going to set you up over the course of the game. And, it's going to be really tough to stop when it's crunch time, although Notre Dame did end up winning that one. So that was a great game from him. The Maryland game, he just goes like absolutely hog wild, like as a 3-level scorer, like outside, inside, through, doesn't matter. I mentioned his power earlier, and yeah, it is something that takes him out of like the all-time prospect category, I think. But there's a rush versus Boise State that he had. He didn't get a sack, but he like walked the tackle back really easy. There's a rep against UCLA where I thought he flashed some bull rush potential. So he's got the get off and the length and the pad level to like push the pocket a little bit, and you can't like forget about it. I'd like to see it incorporated a little bit more. And then as a run defender, I think he's fine. Like I don't have many problems with it. Like he's not somebody who's like, gonna lock out a tackle and like throw him down and make the tackle like I've seen from like Shemar Stewart.
He's not clowny.
Right. He's not clowny. He's not, some of the other edges in this class in that regard, but he's not like he sets the edge, I think. And like he's got range as a tackler. So even if he gets pushed out a little bit farther than you want, he's got those movement skills to kind of disengage and take off after the running back and kind of clip them from behind. So, I think of him as an average run defender and a pass rusher who just, has all the tools, a 20% pressure rate. Like how many sacks did he have this year? Like 16 or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, he had a great season. His numbers are great. They've always been great.
And his
he
first year
checks,
at Edge,
basically,
right?
Yeah. He checks like a ridiculous amount of boxes. And he did it in a good conference for a good team on a great defense, whatever.
Did it in the playoffs,
Yep.
And I think, positional alignment, I think you'd like to have him maybe as a 3-4 outside linebacker.
Right.
Ideally, like Nick Bonito in Denver is just kind of a name that came to mind for me with him. Not saying that's an exact comp or anything, but in that kind of role. So there, other 3-4 outside linebacker teams that are out there are, I think the Panthers at the top of the draft are a 3-4, and the Giants are a 3-4. The Titans are a 4-3, but even then, I don't think it's a disaster if he goes to that scheme and plays more of a D end. I mean, they've got Arden Key and Harold Landry as their ends, but I guess they're also the worst team in the league, so maybe you shouldn't. But it's
working for them.
If he's that talented, whether it be 2 defensive tackles inside of him or 3, I think he's going to be able to rush the passer either way.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think he's talented enough where you'd be pretty sick if you're like, well, he's just not quite the perfect fit. So at 2, we're not going with him. It's like 1 or whatever.
Yeah, I think you can. I think you make it work regardless of if it's like, oh, he's 3-4 or 4-3. Like he can. He does a good job of feeling pulling guards coming around, and he's good at setting the edge. He can wiggle through players, wiggle through small gaps and stuff. He's just such a useful player to have. There's you have to be able to find a way to use him. So that's Abdul Carter. I assume we all have him at 1. And
yeah.
When it comes to making the best hamburgers around, the basics matter. And Wendy's, well, they've really got those burger basics on lock, and boy, does it show. So what's the secret to all those hot and juicy hamburgers? Simple. Wendy's always crafts their hamburgers with that fresh, never frozen beef they're famous for. And the result? Hot and juicy, beefy hamburger perfection. Every time. No matter which hamburger you order from the Wendy's menu, you already know that thanks to those Wendy's burger basics, it's going to be exactly what you were craving. I mean, as long as what you crave is a hot and juicy hamburger. A hamburger made fresh, just for you, not waiting for you. After all, the perfect burger doesn't spend its time waiting around. So when you want a hot and juicy hamburger made fresh just for you, it's gotta be Wendy's. Fresh is kind of their thing, Fresh beef available in the contiguous US, Alaska, and Canada, not available in Hawaii. The next guy up, honestly, the next few guys are kind of all getting similar expected draft.
Yeah, there's definitely not a clear number 2 in this consensus.
That's where it kind of gets a little tricky, but there is a little bit more depth than there would have been last year. So up next would be Mykel Williams. And Theo, you're pumping your fist here. I'm assuming this is your guy.
He's one of my guys, man. I'd be pounding the table for him. And he's not draft Twitter's favorite at all, it seems, which is sad. I feel like there should be a clear consensus number 2 in this class, personally. And I think Williams is that guy. Absolutely. I loved his film. I thought he was super well-rounded. And I just disagree with so many of the criticisms about his pass rush productivity. I just think it's Georgia, man. They rotate their guys in and out a ton. He has 14 sacks in 3 years for them. Jalen Carter had 6 his entire time at Georgia. Nolan Smith had 11 and a half, I think, in 4 years. So I think that considering the school he's at and what he's asked to do, he has plenty of pass rush production. And I get that it's not, Abdul Carter levels or even Mike Green, but Mike Green plays at Marshall, man. You're not getting 17 sacks at Georgia. If you did, you'd be the greatest player of all time by far. They just don't. That game where Abdul Carter ran the hoop a million times against Notre Dame that I mentioned, that's just not what you get to do at Georgia. They rush as a unit. He's aligned so much as a 4-eye, inside the tackle, and he's stunting and he's opening up gaps for 11 to come flying in through off the ball or something like that. He's just not even meant to. it's like a read as a quarterback. Like he's the third read in the progression. Like we're going to have the first guy run around and he's going to make Ewers or whoever step up. And then there's going to be someone coming up the middle and that's going to make Ewers step to the side. And then here they draw that up very concisely of like, you need to be here at this time. And it's not, you might not get a sack, but the entire rush is going to contain and constrict. And that's how we're going to win at Georgia. And that's why these guys don't, there's just no way he can get a pass rush win if he's like just instructed to like, dive inside a certain gap and like just open up space for somebody else. So I think he does such a good job at all of those things. And I think he's just so strong and so hard to move that like he's an extremely valuable piece for them. And I just think it takes a certain kind of player. He led Georgia in sacks as a freshman, guys. Like, and people are like, oh, I don't know about him. It's like, bro, come on. Like, that's about as blue chip as it gets, no? And versus Texas this year, like, I'll talk more about these games in a second, but like versus Texas, he had 2 pressures in the SEC championship game that resulted in picks for Ewers. He had a strip sack on Ewers in the first game that they played. So that's, he had other sacks as well in those matchups. So it's like he whooped Texas's ass like twice, in my opinion. Once was on Banks, one wasn't on Banks. And I'll get into more of how he did it in a second. But like he's 20 years old until June. He is as productive as any Georgia rusher that there's been, I think, like sack wise. He's a glass eater versus the run. Like was a high recruit with instant production. Like he got a sack on Paris Campbell when he was like 18 years old and balled out in the national championship game. Like what more are we looking for here? People are like, oh, I wish he had better bend. I wish he had, it's like, bro, he's lining up as 4-eye. Like he just doesn't get that many. Sure. Maybe he doesn't have the Abdul Carter bend, but there are just, there's just not a lot of time for him to show what he can do, like from a pure pass rushing perspective, I think. So I really like the film. I think that in the context of Georgia's defense, he did a fantastic job overall, dealing with injuries this year as well. A line full of Georgia players just won the Super Bowl. So like, that's a good skill set, good school to be coming out of. So like, I just, there's so much that I like about Williams, and I think that he should be the clear edge too. And I really think at some schemes, like you might have him over Carter.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Blaiden.
No, Matt.
I think it's interesting that Trayvon Walker went number 1 because of his athleticism when, Mykel Williams is more athletic than him.
Definitely. Functional NFL athletic. Like, I don't know what the combine will say.
No. Okay, Combine, we all know, since the combine isn't currently happening, we can all be reasonable and say it doesn't matter. Now, when it does happen, of course, everyone will forget this and then start saying it after the draft. But we're not in that window right now. So we know that if he goes and runs like a 4, whatever, I don't care. Functionally, Williams is strong, he's fast, but his ability at his size to move laterally is crazy. He is a crazy athlete. I agree that he doesn't have the bend of Carter. If he did, he would be among
he'd be Miles.
He'd be like Myles Garrett level athlete. It would be like that plus. Like it would be nuts, dude. That's the level that we'd be talking about. And I think people, honestly, I think part of the reason why people are kind of low on him is, first off, he was incredibly hyped this year. Every single Georgia game they talk about him. To only come away with 5 sacks, just from an outside perspective, because I don't disagree about what you're saying about the Georgia defense, where it's like nobody is putting up like a 15-sack season like that all the time. But I think the fact that he got that hype and then didn't really have like his highest production season. He had 6 sacks, and then 5. Didn't really like get people hyped up for him the same way where Carter goes. And right, like he goes and cooks and he's number 1, and I agree. But I think that didn't get people hyped up. And then I also think that people still view Trayvon Walker like negatively because Aiden Hutchinson ended up being better. And it's like, okay, well, like they were wrong about Walker. And here's the thing. Like, I don't think Walker was the right pick at 1 looking back on it. I agree, but he's coming off of multiple 10-sack seasons in a row here. Like, the production has been there for an athlete like Walker, who is kind of raw, even in a Jacksonville team that doesn't feel like they can get anything right. With Williams, I don't know, just his size and his mobility, I totally agree about. I think there's some limiting factors with his production that I think come from the fact that, like, I don't know, sometimes I wish he would be able to, like, straight up go and like try to fight and win with guys. I think sometimes there is a lack of like a plan necessarily, or like he's got to build on that. But just from like where he is as an athlete, I don't know. I'm kind of with you on this one, Gio.
He's good, man. Like in the Texas games, both of them, like, and I think his pass rush plan is like far along. Like he
let me rephrase that. Let me rephrase that before you say anything. He has moves.
Yeah.
He's got like this spin move that he can do from time to time. Like he's got like some chops. Like he's got moves. Sometimes they don't like, he doesn't like maybe like go 1 to 2 as well as like Carter does, or he doesn't.
I wish it was smoother. I wish
he doesn't
it was
set
less
things up like
messy.
Carter does. So it's not about like this is just some like oaf who's out there and like can only long arm guys and that's it. He's got some moves and some talent in the bag, but it's about being able to string them together. And he's super young, so it's reasonable.
And yeah, he's super young, again, 20 till June. And in the Texas games that I saw, I mean, we're just going through some of the highlights here. I saw him try the DeMarcus Ware fake spin. That's a move that is very rare. Like you don't see that one whipped out of the bag too many times. So you see him, if he ever like figures that stuff out, it's going to be extremely scary. I saw him do a move in the Texas game, the SEC championship game, where he at first, he long-armed with his left arm. He caught the punch with his right arm and lifted it up while, like, bull rushing. And then with the arm he was bull rushing with, he yanked the tackle down and then turned it into a swim, and he got by the guy. It's like, that's pretty good. Like, I don't see that from the other edges in this class. Like, even Carter, you don't really see him, like, catch the punch and, like, turn it back on them. Like that's something that I think he could even add to his bag, and it's very high level stuff. But like when I saw that from Williams, I was like, dude, and he would like, kind of rush up the arc, cause a tackle to get too much depth, and then, put his foot in the ground and sneak through that B gap that opened up. And he's big and strong enough that even when the guard disconnected from the defensive tackle and tried to like slam the door shut on him, he like burst through that double team in the Texas game, and it resulted in a Ewers pick. And then in the first Texas game against, he was going up against Banks, like he did set up that inside and then went around the outside edge. He did it twice. One was a big time hit on Ewers, one was a forced fumble. So even though he doesn't have like the ankle flexion that you would like ideally love to see, like I still saw him win around the outside track versus a top tier tackle in this class.
Yep.
And then against the run, man, in the Notre Dame game, I highlighted this on my TikTok. There was a play where it was counter and the tight end came at him. He recognized that it was counter. He took the tight end, threw him into the first puller, then threw the tight end away, took on the second puller and tackled him. He took out 3 guys on that rep. And versus Texas in the SEC championship game, going back to that, he was 2-gapping versus their tackle, like fully locking out, and then the run bounced outside. He like threw him and got in the other gaps. Like, damn, man, he sets such a good edge all the time. He's got his swims to disengage quickly. Versus Clemson, there were times where they were trying to seal him with tight ends, and then they'd throw it out to the flat. He'd just like run through the tight ends and go track it down. Like, he had a couple good tackles out on the perimeter in that game, and he threw on an RPO, he like completely pantsed to the right tackle at one point, but it was a pass, so it doesn't go down as any kind of thing for him, but it was a great play. Just, I don't understand people who are low on him, and I think he's going to be a lock to go in the top 10 or probably even the top 5 or maybe even the top pick. I mean, if Trayvon Walker can go 1 over Hutchinson, like can this guy go 1 over Carter or something like that? If you're the Titans and you're like, well, we have Arden Key and we have Landry, like they're already pretty like fast, outside the arc guys. Like maybe we want, somebody like Williams. Mm-hmm. Not saying I'd endorse that necessarily, but I really do think Williams is right there with Carter. They're just so different stylistically. Like, and I do think Carter is going to get more of the sack production, but like he's not taking out 3 guys on counter. Like he's good run defender, but like Williams is a great one, and he just shows up in so many valuable ways that are kind of unseen.
Yeah, it really does feel like a lot of his flaws or issues are like things you can fix with coaching and fix at the NFL level. Like there's a lot of guys that we'll talk about where it's like, oh, their biggest issues, their arms are small. And it's like, well, that's kind of like, you're not going to fix that. It's like, they're going to eventually kind of hit a ceiling with an issue like that. But if you're a guy that's, what is he? 6'5", 270. Yeah, you're probably going to be fine. Like as long as, like if your biggest problem is like, oh, maybe you need a little bit more diversity in your bag, or like we can probably fix that. Like, let's be real, with that kind of a skill set. And like here's the thing: if the comparison is, well, Walker went number 1, why can't this guy go number 1? I mean, right now he's getting projected to go in like the early teens, right? And if you're like, well, I don't want to draft him at 1, okay, take him at 10, dude. Like that I think that'd be pretty good value. I agree with you guys there.
And if you could get him at 10, I just think that'd be such a home run. And some things like the bend and the maybe the get off is it's not as good as Carter, and those are things that you might just have to live with. But at the same time, he might have a little bit more to him, and it's just from his alignments, it may not always just be obvious. I feel like so many times he starts on the interior, and then to begin the play, he has to hop out to the edge to begin the rep and then engage with the tackle. And it's like, well, that's not really like your first step there just looks very different than it would be if you're rushing hard off the edge. So I'll have to watch more from him. I mean, we're still in February here, but I think at 20 years old, man, by the time he's 24, like he could be a total monster. And I get he doesn't have a lot of fans because even the Georgia people are like a little bit underwhelmed by him. So it's like there's no hive that is really riding for him after he, didn't live up to expectations this year. But I'm in that hive.
His pass rush win rate's 11%, which is low even for like Georgia guys who like aren't getting like
it is, but
a lot of
it is, but it's like he's a 2 technique and like the center and guard are both on him like a couple times every game, and it's like there's just what would Carter's win rate be if he was playing in those alignments? Like there are some things you can tweak here.
Jalen Carter's win rate was like 16%.
I should probably pump the brakes a little bit when I say like Carter got 6 sacks and this guy got 14 or whatever it was. Like Carter only didn't get sacks because he played like 40% of the reps. Like his win rate, I'm sure, was crazy. Like Jalen Carter was in a different league than even Williams as a prospect, but that just kind of goes to say more about Carter than Williams. And Carter was just like the best defensive player on a Super Bowl, like one of the greatest defenses in playoff history. So
look, I think the take with this guy, I don't disagree about the negatives, and I do think he's still a project. It's still a developmental thing. I still don't think that he's like, well, this guy hasn't maybe gone one-on-one with a tackle as much and just been like, that's your one job. It's like, okay, well, that's going to take some time to get, again, used to sort of just like how to play out those pass rushes in a way where Abdul Carter's like already got that from day
definitely
one, to set guys up. And that's not an easy thing to develop. But at the same time, I don't think Trayvon Walker was the most like complete guy ever. And I think through his athleticism, we've seen him develop and have great success. And I like Williams as an athlete more. And if I can get him, at the bottom of the top 10, I'd feel pretty decent about that. I won't lie. On top of that, while I do think like some of his athletic weaknesses, like the bend, sometimes he makes up for that, because if he can just get by you a little bit, instead of him trying to bend to get around you, he's going to have his arm up against you and he can crowbar you or whatever you away. And now it's basically the same thing going on. And he can get around the edge just through different means. Now you're not close to him and you can't quite, get him off of his track. And on top of that, like, I think he has some pretty good moments with the get off. He is not sluggish to me. I'm probably not quite as high on him as you, but I definitely see the vision.
As long as you got him at 2, man. I like, shout out Dane Brugler, man, who does a lot more stuff than me, but I think he has him at like 5. And there's a lot of guys that I really like who talk about the draft who are like low on him. And I just can't understand it. And with the first step, like, he's asked to spike inside on some like blitzes. Like if the nickel comes off the edge, the gap you're originally at as a defensive end, it might move inside one because you don't have to set the edge anymore. Like some of his first steps in like that situation, like he crosses the gap in just one big step and like rips through and he's living in there. And it's like, that's the first step I like to see, like if you could do that, like I'm sure your first step rushing off the edge is pretty good. And again, in big games, he showed up this year through the injuries. Since he was young, he showed up. Like he's as close to a blue chip as I think you can find in this class. Like him and Carter are your dudes that, from the very beginning, I think showed what they needed to show and continue to show that into the college football playoffs.
And with the developmental stuff with Williams. And I'm looking back at the notes I had on him. I also think he can play a little high at times.
Yeah,
I will say.
I agree.
There's some things that could not be great. That, like maybe we're saying like, okay, he needs to develop more of a pass rush plan at times, and he needs to play a little bit lower. And I think sometimes his get off isn't good, and then other times it's really good. Like he has the ability, but isn't always consistent. Mm-hmm. And it's like, how can those things string together? But he's very young, and it's like, okay, and he's got great traits and cool. I look at the guys below him, or some of the guys, and I'm like, they have issues that I'm not even like, I hope this develops well. They have issues like, well, that's just going to be a weakness, but I think they're good anyway. Whereas with Williams, it's almost like, here's what I think it is. I think this is partially, it's the production, but partially it's the expectations. Everybody is judging Williams on a blue chip, are you the number 1 overall pick edge rusher grading scale? Because that's going into this year, like really it felt like kind of like there was no reason why he couldn't turn himself into the number 1 pick, which it doesn't kind of feel like he might be right now. Mm-hmm. Whereas with Mike Green, you're not judging him on that. You're judging him on the scale of like, this guy like is kind of coming out of nowhere to get drafted in the first round. So it's a lot easier to look at the positives of a guy like that. And it's a lot easier to look at the negatives of a guy like Williams coming from Georgia with all of this talent. I really, really, truly believe that is part of it.
Oh, 100%. And then with Green, you look at the PFF page and they're like 5 picks apart. And then you look at the pass rushing productivity and like PFF has Williams at like a 61 grade on true pass sets. And I'm sure Green is like at 99 or whatever, but it's like one played at Marshall, like off the edge. And one guy is like doing the dirty work, like plugging the run, like right. It's or like just crash, like being a bowling ball on a stunt. Like these calculator stat boy things, people keep quote tweeting my Williams should be. I have a tweet that says Williams should be top 5 on everyone's big board, and everyone's quote tweeting me with like his pass rush win rate. Like I don't care, sadly. Like
Theo does not care.
I understand. If he was on the edge all the time and it was like this, I would be maybe worried. But just knowing where he aligns and knowing what his role is in this defense, I'm like, he can figure it out. He'll be fine. Whatever.
Well,
hopefully,
Mike Green is not the next guy on the kind of consensus leaderboard right now. There is Jalen Walker, I know we kind of said that we probably would skip him because
I thought he was an off-ball backer. I didn't watch him when I was going through these edges because I watched Williams and it seemed like he was kind of this hybrid player, but I didn't know if 11 would be off the edge all the time. So he's someone we can maybe get around to.
I did the same, but
later.
maybe we'll do a
talk about it at some
film. We could
point.
do a film breakdown on him one of these days.
That might not be a bad idea.
Yeah, he looked good from what I saw. Like, you know, seemed fast as fuck, cleaning everything up.
So then the next guy would be Tennessee, James Pearce. We were kind of talking about this guy in the group chat a little bit. Would be, what is this, the third year in a row now where we're getting a guy who's like, he would be the smallest edge rusher in the NFL right now. But this guy's a little weird because instead of him being like this super fast guy that can win with speed, that's like winning with speed all the time off the edge, that happens to also be like, oh, he's not a bad run defender either. This guy's primary skill set is that he's like super strong for a guy that's 240 pounds. And that kind of worries me. I don't know how you guys feel, but to me, it's like a guy whose like primary skill set is power, being that small. It's like, I hate to say it, I kind of want to see what the combine numbers look like. Like if he goes out,
that's fair for him.
If he goes out and runs like a 4.7 or a 4.8 out 240,
he got clocked at 23 miles an hour taking a pick back.
You have this idea that he's like not fast.
He's fast. He can't bend though.
And I think you have this idea that he's like mostly winning off of bull rushes.
It's not that he's mostly winning off of bull rushes, but like there's I think it was the Oklahoma game I was watching where like a pulling guard would come, and when I watch Carter finds a way to like dip underneath it, and I'm like, oh dude, what in the world was that? Pearce just takes it on and like wins, and I'm like, oh damn, like that's crazy.
My answer to all of this is scoreboard. Like it works. Works in the SEC. It just does work. He has incredibly long arms, and it gives him the leverage to win against bigger guys, even when weight-wise it feels like he shouldn't. Here's the thing about Pearce. I feel like in some scouting reports you read them, because I like to read the scouting reports after I look at a guy just to see what people are, of course.
Yeah,
right?
Sure.
And a lot of people are saying, well, like strength is going to be an issue. And it's kind of true. He doesn't have a great anchor because he's 245 pounds or whatever the hell. But he's not weak at the point of attack. He's not weak when it comes to him trying to go up against somebody in terms of like his upper body, because his freakishly long arms allow him so much leverage. And the fact that I feel like he plays pretty low a lot of the times just makes it easy for him to get up in a guy's grill first, move him some, and disengage. He absolutely is fantastic about it. Pearce, to me, is a guy whose production is totally not phony. I don't think that he's coming across as like someone who's only winning in this one weird way where it's not going to work outside of the SEC. I don't disagree that like him being 240 pounds versus 265 shouldn't be viewed as a negative. I don't disagree that like at a time he was being viewed as like the clear number one because he was like, you know, he's being viewed as like the next great edge prospect. And it's like at 240, I'm just not sure that you can do that. And he didn't have quite the season to make you think that. But to me, he's somebody who is really hard to get to first. And he's really quick. And while maybe he can be stiff in some ways, he's like somebody who's got you in multiple different aspects and is one of the great play finishers in this draft class, which means something to me. He is a heat-seeking missile in the backfield. His long arms allow him to get the guys that I think other dudes wouldn't. And I know everything as far as rushers go has gone the way of like pressures and just like close enough is good. But to me, I think the fact that he really completes plays as good as anybody else is fantastic. I'm really high on him.
He is such a weird watch because you look at him and he's listed at 243 when you Google him. Okay. And I look at the PFF stats, and here he's got the second highest pass rush win rate in the whole country, and I think the highest pass rush productivity. So it's like, okay, 240 pounder with crazy good production here. I'm expecting to see someone who is like winning around the art, like bendy as hell, right? And he's not that at all. Like he's very, I think, stiff when it comes to ankle flexion, when it comes to kind of disconnecting his upper and lower half. You just don't see it you just don't see him do it. But, you know, the numbers are still what they are. And why is that? I think he's super smart. He knows how to get himself aligned. Like he can, like, if there's a chip his way, he's very good at kind of like contorting himself where he's like avoiding the chip and also like getting himself in an alignment to bull rush the player in front of him. He can kind of like set those things up well, and he gets his hands in the right place, and his pad level is low. And like versus Bama, he was walking those tackles back into Milroe this year, like over and over again.
Against great. I mean, and there's just nothing phony about the competition that he's playing, at least at the bare minimum, from a strength standpoint. These are the guys you're going to see. These are the strong guys. These guys are huge, and he's still able to walk them back. His arms are, I don't know what they're actually going to measure as, and I hate that, like, I bet you they won't measure as like the longest at the combine, but they look the longest. And the way he plays, it seems like they're the longest. He's impossible to get first contact on at points, man. Really, it's fantastic. And I think his ability, like even when he doesn't win, his ability to just like disengage when a play kind of breaks down and then go at the quarterback. I agree, he's not the most bendy guy, but he's very quick.
Yeah,
and he's got great range. Yeah, seriously, I think that stuff matters.
I love his range. I think he's very good, you know, hash to sideline. Like if anything is going to get outside of him, he's probably going to go track it down. And he's very smart. My favorite plays from him, they're not pure pass rushes, honestly. They're plays where he, like versus Florida on a QB sneak on the goal line, he like kind of wraps around Graham Mertz and forces a fumble and recovers it on the one, like an inch before the end zone. Like that was one of my favorite plays from him. One versus Ohio State, which wasn't a great game from him overall in the playoffs there, but he did have one of my favorite plays where, again, in a 4th and short situation, they line up like they're going to sneak it and then they throw it to the outside. And he's all over it. He just pops up and pursues laterally and tackles that. There's a play on Milroe where he reads the mesh point and contains Milroe and takes him down by his ankles in open space, which is not easy at all. Didn't beat anybody to get there, really. It was like off play action, and they kind of left him unblocked, or maybe there's just a chipper on him. But again, like reading the mesh point, like diagnosing plays, like looking to strip the ball, like discipline, smarts. His technique could probably get a little bit better. I think he could add more moves, but like I was just watching the Georgia game before he doesn't have a crazy, that's the other weird thing about watching him is like, oh, well, he doesn't have crazy bend. It's like, maybe he's like Latu or something and just like has this cosmic sense of like what move to use. It's like, he doesn't even have that really even in terms of consistency. But I watched that Georgia game and they were running away from him a lot in that game. And some of these backside blocks that, you know, we're engaging with him, he just like, whoosh, whoosh. You can't see what I'm doing, listeners, but just like, you know, quickly deconstruct that punch and keep going on his way. So he's got some flashes of some high-end hand fighting, although I do wish he would do more countering. I hear you, Blaiden. Like, he is a 240-pounder whose game, like, is just doesn't look like a 240-pounder at all.
And it make any sense. Maybe I might have to like just change my thinking on this. Like maybe I'm being.
I think so.
Maybe I'm being too much of a traditionalist. Maybe like
I agree with you.
Unfortunately, it's a scoreboard thing. It just does work. This is the issue. I don't disagree. If somebody told me about a player like James Pearce, I'd be like, is that going to work at the next level? But I just have a really hard time buying into like it's not that he does like lacks high end traits or anything. He doesn't. It's just a little bit funky how he gets it done.
I think he kind of lacks.
Up, apparently,
he makes up for it in some cerebral ways. But
he
like
unofficially runs a sub 4.5. So like,
oh, he's gonna run fast.
The speed's gonna.
Oh, he's gonna run under a 4.5. But what are and look at his arms, man. Just look at him.
His arms are crazy long.
He got
I can't wait to see what he
miles
measures that, man.
He's fast as hell.
It's
He's just
like,
look.
he just can't bend the arc. He's super stiff. Oh man, it's gonna be
Where's the
what that L drill he's gonna do, and it's gonna be really rough. And that's
He just does go beast mode in a way that a lot of other prospects that we're going to talk about today don't. That's the truth.
And
again,
I'm like Nolan Smith didn't look anything like this.
He's got a great.
Nolan
he's
had
got
crazy
a great
bend though.
That's what I'm saying. Nolan had crazy bend.
He's got a great motor too, and
I can like.
Go ahead, Matt. You're slandering.
I'm just saying. I just think that this is going to work at the next level. I guess I'm just repeating myself.
Yeah, I don't know. My first thought was like, and maybe this is just like the Browns fan of me coming out, but I'm like, if he goes up against DeJuan Jones,
bruh,
like
he might be able to bend under DeJuan Jones. Like what does DeJuan Jones have to do with any of this?
Saying,
but
like, DeJuan Jones like almost twice his weight, man.
Look, I agree with the premise of like, well, maybe he isn't powerful enough to convert his speed to power on NFL tackles, even though it works in college for the most part. And maybe like that plus the lack of bend will make him just kind of a mediocre pass. I get those concerns. And then as a run defender, like I think he's good, but he's not like Williams out there, you know? Like he's not like
he's not
Shemar Stewart.
I like him a lot as a
I like him as a run defender too, but like versus Ohio
He makes a lot of plays when they run away from him. I like that. He can you know, when they just send like maybe like a tight end at him or something, or they try to like just like barely like chip him or whatever.
It's like
those that
guys.
Doesn't and the thing is that like because he has those long arms, like a lot of the times those things don't slow him down, and then he's fast as hell. He can get around the whole play and come back and make something happen a lot. He is a great play finisher. I'm telling you. And his get-off's good. I'm telling you.
It is good. He also jumps the snap. Like in the games that I watched, he knew the snap count and he kept he doesn't spend any time on the ground, which I like. There are some edge rushers in this class that I like.
Go ahead and say their name.
Shemar Stewart is on the ground a lot. He's on the ground a lot. And who else is on the ground a lot? There's another guy.
You're thinking of the Arkansas Landon Jackson guy.
He's on the ground a lot. I think Mike Green is on the ground a decent amount.
That's okay. Well, that's different. He's our baby. He's our baby boy. We forgive him.
Matt's guy.
Pearce is never like I don't know if I ever saw him on the ground. Like he's hard to like if he can jump the snap and kind of compensate for the stiffness that way. If he can kind of start to turn that corner, it's hard to push him up the arc. Like he just keeps moving, and it's like how is he so light? Like that's what I don't understand in those situations. It's like he's light, but you can't fuck with him really at pushing him around. Again, in the Ohio State game, I do think at the point of attack at times it was revealed that he's not the greatest of great run defender. Like his weight did start to show there a little bit throughout the course of that game. Sure. So for me, I've got him at my fifth place ranking. Not 3, which I think is where this is leading to for Matt. But I do like him. I do like him, and I think his weird bundle of tools can come together into a good NFL player, even though it is kind of weird, and I'm not totally sure how it will work.
Okay.
He'd be my 4.
4.
But he's my 4. He'd be my 4 with a heart if we were like giving letterboxed reviews. You know how sometimes you guys have like a 3-star, but it's different if you give it a like or not. Some people do that.
It's like in a college football 25, you got like you could be a 3-star with a gem, or you could be like a 4 or a 5-star, but with like the gem with an X through it.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he would be my 5 with the gem with an X through it.
Wow. Fair enough.
So
yeah, he's weird, man. He is weird. He's a little bit like Jared Verse. That's kind of it reminded me a little bit of that when I was watching it, but like even lighter.
Here's what needs to happen. Right, he needs to get drafted, and that NFL team either needs to put him on like an insane JJ Watt type of diet, like 12 to 15,000 calories a day, or he needs to go into like intense yoga. One of the two. And we're either going to get his bend to be crazy, his flexibility to be top tier, or he's going to become 280 pounds.
280. We'll get him.
Yeah.
I like him dropping into coverage too, by the way. I'll say that. That's another thing I think he's kind of good at is
because when he's
distributing some of those routes.
Because when he's somebody who can like get downhill too, like at something shallow, he's really good at wrapping them up and making the play. He's a great play finisher, man.
He is. So that brings us to Shemar Stewart. Again, not at Mike Green yet. I know, Matt, you're getting antsy, but we'll get to him next, I promise.
Oh, Shemar.
Oh, Shemar.
He got that dog in him. He only has 1.5 sacks each year in college football. So kind of like Mykel Williams, you've got to hit the,
This is totally different. 1.5 sacks versus 6 sacks a season, including your like true freshman year at Georgia.
Yeah.
Is 2 very different things, in my honest opinion, especially from where Stewart is playing. Here's the thing. I don't hate Stewart. I don't. I just think, like, my reasoning for why he's not producing is just more so that I just don't think his get off is that good. And I think that's really a killer.
I think he has the false steps though. Like he doesn't always gain ground on his first step, which maybe they fix that in one day. You ever think about that?
This is what we were watching in New Orleans. We were watching Shemar Stewart one night at the Airbnb, and we're like, dude, like he's so close. Like, how does he only have 1.5 sacks? And then it's like, oh,
maybe
he false steps every single play.
And they're not the worst false steps ever. And I think sometimes they don't happen, and it looks okay. But there's a lot about his pass rush that leaves a bit to be desired. Definitely. Like it's not just that he has 1.5 sacks. Like his pressure rate is also very low. Looking at Sports Info Solutions, I think pressure rate. What I put a filter on it, and now I'm botching it here. I think it was pressure rate rushing 4, like in just those scenarios. It was only at like 9%. And for example, like Pearce is at like 18, I think, and Carter's at 20, and Shemar Stewart's at 9. And that's not good. And I think the reasons for that have to do with the false steps. I think they have to do with his hand placement and his pad level, like being high. He has a lot of natural strength, but you don't really see him, reverse pancake guys and like really have these viral bull rushes like, you'd like to see from someone that big and that good of a run defender, and that you would really love to see his power translate to sacks more often. And it just doesn't, because I think he plays high and he doesn't get his hands in the right place. Like they'll be up in the guy's face mask, or he'll kind of punch up and they'll just glance off the guy's shoulder, and then he'll kind of have his just kind of arms up in the air and he's locked. Like I think his hand fighting needs to get way better. There's things to clean up with the get off. What else? Yeah, just everything about like the bend is good for a 290 pounder or whatever he's listed at. I think he was 281 at the Senior Bowl, which is sweet. But and he's got a little bit of bend to him. We were watching him in New Orleans, and that was one of the first things we said is like, man, this guy's got a little bit of like ankle flexion, right? Like a little bit of bend to him. Yeah. And to have like that size and like to have that to your game, it does make you just a very interesting bundle of tools, perhaps. And he's got this floor as a run defender that's very good. But right. I don't know. I like the bundle of tools, even though it's a bit of a mess right now. Do you guys have anything? I've been rambling for too long. I'm going to pass. Someone else take over.
I don't disagree with you on a lot of your analysis of him. I mean, when we were watching him and Nola, I thought you were a little bit higher on him, which is why I was giving you some crap. I like him as a player because he's got tools and he's also very easy to get on the field, right?
Yeah.
Because of his run defense. And I also think in a world where maybe he's like a 3-4 end, which is what I feel like he probably should be or could be in terms of just his size, you might not be asking him to generate as much pressure as you would like a 4-3 end, right? So there'd be a little bit less pressure on him to be always winning. And if it takes a couple of years for you to develop him as, a pass rusher, or he never even really reaches some like crazy height, you can feel like you made a pretty good pick, assuming you're picking him late enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
I do think that his false step stuff and his get off really worries me, and it just like even the reps where he would win, he wouldn't. But I'd say overall, like, he's not in my top 4, right? Maybe he could be in the argument for 5th, but I like him as a player. He's a solid guy, and he's got some upside, and who knows if he hits it, but
yeah,
I don't disagree.
I've got him at 3, which I know it's a bit rich for your blood, but he's just such a good run defender is the thing. Like, he's a highlight run defender. Like, he had a rep versus Mizzou where the tackle is trying to, clear him out to open up a hole for the running back, running wide zone. And he sets the edge first, and then he knows the running back's not going to try to go around the outside of him. So he like falls into the B gap even before the running back has made that choice. And because he anticipated it, the running back is just totally fucked and runs right into him. And it's just this giant collision. And he throws a really good tackle at Mizzou just out of the way to do it, just discards him. Some of the powerful run defending positions he gets in just are, Greg Rousseau-esque, who's a really good run defender up in Buffalo. And people really didn't like him when he was selected in the first round because of some stiffness.
You were a big Rousseau
I was a big
guy.
Rousseau guy because of the strength he showed at the point of attack. It's like just that you like. And then if you can clean up some of the technique, he becomes a good power rusher, and then you'll see what else you can get from there. I can see Shemar Stewart on kind of that same development track, but he's got more bendiness than Rousseau did. So it's like he could even be a...
I see your vision. I really don't dislike him.
Yeah.
Again, like you said, it's tools plus easy to get on the field. Plus, I mean, he's pretty young if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. And he had some reps versus Arkansas that I watched earlier today where it's like he was, chopping the hands down, like getting that tackle leaning too far to the outside, and then he spun back in. And I was like, okay, like that's pretty good. And he carries that 281 pounds so well, man. Like he looks the part, man. I'm not to Moneyball that. If Moneyball, Billy Bean or whatever his name is here, would kill me with his bare hands for saying he looks the part with a 9% pressure rate, but he does, man. And he's got a... I'm not as high on him as some are, but he intrigues me, so I've got him at 3.
Nice. I think that's fair. Matt, you have Mike Green at 1, right?
No, I have him at 3.
Oh, okay.
Mike Green.
He's up next.
Marshall.
He's up next.
Give us your synopsis.
I think people are kind of worrying a little bit too much about the size with him. I mean, he's pretty nutty. Honestly, I compared this last time because we've already made a video about him. If you want to check that out on the channel, go ahead and do it. We're already running pretty long, and I'm sure we have a few more guys we want to get into. So
yeah,
I'll try to make this as quick as possible. But Green is incredibly quick, incredibly twitchy, and has incredibly good bend, and his get off is amazing. This guy is unbelievably fast. And I think his inside-out game, like he's almost Carter-esque in that sense. I'm not saying he's as good,
but
like
definitely remind me of
games, the games are definitely very similar. Now, I think that Green is maybe a little bit more prone, maybe a little bit to like just saying, I'm going to go outside and I'm going outside and that's what I'm doing. Whereas I think Carter sometimes can be better at like going into a rep thinking that and then maybe playing what the tackle does rather than like Green is more setting things up rep from rep. Like it might be out. Now, you're some big tackle. You've got to come way out to try to stop me from getting around the edge. And then that's when I hit you with it. And I go inside or I cross or whatever, hit the hezzy. But like, dude, it's super successful. It's incredibly good. And I love him because he's just so aggressive too. He's another guy. I feel like we're kind of saying the same things about a few of these dudes, but honestly, I mean, like we're talking about 3 guys who are all sort of relatively within the same weight range, and I think all play really aggressive. He's another dude where I think he actually holds up decently well strength-wise. He's probably not that much lighter than Carter, although his frame I think is a little bit bigger, so he looks more the skinny edge rusher part at times. But he's somebody who can hold his own against certain guys, and then when they're not running towards him, which we talked a lot about in that last video, where it's like they didn't always run towards him. Granted, it was the MAC, and if there's like a first-round draft pick, I mean,
yeah,
on the other side of the field every single time.
That
it was a MAC.
true.
It was a MAC. It was a MAC. It was a MAC. But he would be a guy who could come across the formation and make a huge play in the run game as well. Now, any of these lighter guys, it probably does feel a little bit like they know they can't just like win straight up in the run game all the time, so they're just going to be really aggressive to try to make up for it, and it can be boom or bust. But I still do feel like you have to have a level of tools to be able to pull off some of the stuff that Green did when he'd come around the formation. Again, if you want to see the specific plays, where we did a whole big thing on it, go check out that video.
Like a 45-minute video.
But I compared him to Quinyon Mitchell in the sense that this was a dude last year who we really weren't that high on here because, yes, he was this great athlete, but it doesn't even look like it's the MAC, you know? To me, Green kind of falls into that same category. Now, Green does have a more significant flaw that you can point to in terms of just like his weight makes him kind of a funky guy. But when I watch him, it's like that's how somebody who has, 95th percentile, 99th percentile, just sort of quickness, bend, flexibility, speed, athleticism would look in the MAC. His production absolutely lined up where you needed it to be.
Yeah, led the NCAA in sacks.
And he I think his pressure rate was fantastic the last 2 years, even though the sacks didn't come for him last year. So I'm a huge fan of him. I think that I think he's going to be really good. I'm kind of as we've been talking through it, I think the top 4 guys in this class are all really good, actually. I do. Maybe we get to a point where we say, well, this guy has a hard limit and this guy has a hard limit with like Green and Pearce, or maybe Williams like never truly becomes the pass rusher that you'd need him to be like the top guy. Maybe Abdul Carter tops out as like a Pro Bowler rather than an
Brian
All-Pro.
Burns
It never becomes like a tier 1 guy. But I do feel like all of these guys, like if you made me bet, I'd feel tough betting against any one of those top 4 being productive. I really do. I kind of think that all of them are at least going to find some sort of role and have serious upside. I'm a fan of this edge class.
Yeah, I agree with you on the Green Mitchell thing. Like when I was talking to the Eagles corner coach, that's kind of what he was like. He's like, we didn't care that he went to Akron, dude. Like, he's like, if he's good, he's good.
And here's the thing. You should care in the sense that, like, if I was sitting up here and telling you, well, Green had 16 sacks and Abdul Carter only had 10, so I think Green's better than Carter. It's like, yeah, that would be a phony comparison because it's easier to get sacks in the MAC than it is in the Big Ten. But if I'm sitting here telling you Mike Green's like got all these incredible traits, he either has them or he doesn't. It doesn't matter. He could be playing high school football. He could be playing against middle schoolers. And I'd be like, damn, he's still really fast. He cooked that 8th grader.
I love him as a pass rusher. I really do think that he's got some special abilities. The spin he hit against Ohio State is one of the greatest individual pass rush moves I've ever seen in my life, and he did it against Ohio State. Like, it was so sick. And he's got all the same tools that Carter does.
To be fair, it was not against Ohio State's like top tackle guy.
It would have cooked any tackle, man. Like, it was crazy.
It was still
It was crazy.
Yeah.
He took such a severe path to the inside. Like, he put his foot in the ground and it was like he was going to go through the B gap. Like, he was going to cross that tackle's face. The tackle was so sure of it. He took such a severe angle, and then all of a sudden he disappears from out in front of him, goes back around with the spin, just pirouettes. And he does that kind of thing all the time. Like, he gets the head fakes going, like freezes these players in front of him and chisels out space for himself that he just so easily takes advantage of with his bend. Like, it is real, racetrack motorcycle bend that he's got. And yeah, he can survive the pushes upfield while he's doing it. He, wins outside in and inside out, but I still am not totally sold on Green, as good of a pass rusher as he is. I'm like, what if he's like a Bryce Huff or something like that? I am not sold on the run defense yet. I wish I saw more physicality with him. in the Louisiana game against the Ragin' Cajuns, that's the game that concerns me the most because he's on the ground a lot in that game. And even against a team that's like not Ohio State or anything like that, I still am not seeing the power that I want to see from a guy who's playing at a bit of a lower level. Like they sent him on a stunt at one point, and number 90 on Marshall was looping around him. And what he was doing on the stunt was like he gave him a quick little pop of power, and then he backpedaled, and then he tried to go in, and then he tried to like swim back out. I'm like, you don't be doing all that. All right. Now you and 90 are in the same spot because you're not just denting this guy's face in on the stunt. Like you, even in a situation like that, he was trying to just be, you know, finesse everything. And
he got too cute.
He got too cute.
That's a fair thing. And you can't have a guy who gets too cute.
And he went around the edge a lot, and he got too far upfield a lot, and he opened up spaces that the quarterback could have or did escape through a decent amount. And I'm like, okay, if you put this guy on the field and it was 3rd down and 10, like I do think he could cook something up. But if he's on the field all 3 downs in the NFL right now, like would he be targeted in the run game and would he be able to hold up? Like I watched him and then Shemar Stewart like back to back and then watched him again. And it's like, it really is jarring when he has to set the edge, like against the Virginia Techs and the that he played in the Ohio States. Like he's not as good as it. Like he's getting kind of pushed around a little bit, even if he's fighting, it's not like he's in a great position to make plays.
But that's like almost not a fair comparison. I don't disagree with what you're saying, but like
I know it's not a fair comparison with Stewart because he's a different position.
Is a 3-4 outside linebacker, right?
Yeah,
Stewart is like an end in that same thing. Like these two guys, to me,
you're
are
right.
just
That
like,
it's a different position. It is
aren't even close in terms of. And this is the problem: is like I'm going through like, well, it's completely unrelated almost, but I'm going through like the edge, and it's like I've got Jordan Birch here. It's like this guy weighs like 300 pounds, and then I've got James Pearce, and I'm like this guy weighs literally 60 pounds less. It's like, okay, well these two dudes like really aren't the same position at all.
Yeah,
and we've overextended what the term edge
we kind
means.
of have. There's different techniques along the line of scrimmage for a reason. If you can play 4-eye or 7 or 9 or whatever it is. So yeah, you're right that I shouldn't say he's not as good at setting the edges Shemar Stewart, and that's why I don't like him. But I still think it's still the same assignment at times,
wrong.
Like versus wide zone. The guy who's farthest out there is probably going to be the one who has to take on that tackle and set it. And when I see Green do it versus some of the other players in this class, I'm like, I don't know.
He got washed down by a tight end against Ohio State.
He did get washed down by. I thought it was a very fair fight between him and the Ohio State tight ends, and they ran a swing out to Judkins, and they had number 88. I don't know who that is on Ohio State. Block him, and he couldn't quite get around him. So, as much as I love the pass rushing and the speed and the quickness, I do think he's got some potentially some fatal flaws as well. But I could be dooming this, and I think a deal.
I think that's totally reasonable because right now, I mean, and I've done it too. It's like we're talking about Mike Green as like a top, not a top 10 guy, but like kind of like in those teens areas. Now, part of that is because I think a lot of people are starting to look at this class and really question the number of first round talents that we're seeing. And if he's, if you take Shemar Stewart at 25 and he never quite turns into a sack producing guy or like a pressure producing guy, but he always is a great run defender, you might not be that mad coming away from it, although you didn't really hit on the ceiling. If Mike Green turns into a 3rd down specialist and you took him at 12, it's like that's a little hard to swallow, even if he's very good at it, which I do think there is a floor there with the fact that I have a hard time seeing him as not a really fantastic 3rd down specialist.
He is such a good pass rusher, and it is the thing that you pay these guys for is to go get the quarterback. And he's as good at getting after the quarterback as he's just maybe just a tick below Abdul Carter in just that aspect purely. And that's what's nice about him. But I don't think he's quite the run defender that even Carter is. And he's certainly not the run defender of Williams and Pearce even. And certainly not of Shemar Stewart. So we'll see with him. But
his arms coming in short also really do not help him.
Yeah.
So I think with
yeah, go ahead. He's not somebody.
No, go ahead. No,
I wish he bull rushed more too. I'll say that. Like, there's a couple reps for Abdul Carter where it's like he doesn't do it all the time, but at least I've seen it, and he's kind of checked that box.
And that's true. And Green isn't going to have that at the NFL.
Green doesn't
he's
do
not
it.
Going to. He doesn't
really
have the arm length, and he doesn't have the strength. Well, he just doesn't have it.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't think his traits line up with being somebody who can do that. That's fair. I do think, when you look at these edges, to me, scouting is not even necessarily about like it being some mystery to figure out what a player is or isn't. Like, we can all sit here and agree on what a guy is, but what makes these debates so interesting is like determining how much everything is worth and how a guy rounds together and becomes good. And nobody has perfected that. So it's definitely worth thinking about, because I don't disagree with any of your criticisms about Green. It's just like, how much do you weight what he brings as a pass rusher, I guess?
Yeah. I have him with like an early second round grade. I think he'd be like an ideal pick really early in the second. But if he's like your first round pick and you're like hoping like one day he'll be one of the higher paid edges in the league, I just don't know about that.
Well, here is my one thing that I'll say that why I'm maybe a little higher. Green was not always an edge rusher.
He's a wide receiver, wasn't he?
He was a wide receiver recruit. So not that long ago, this guy was not an edge rusher. And I mean, not that long ago, this guy was like, I think they had him listed at like his freshman year at like 215. So is it possible for him to add maybe some more weight to his frame? I think with some guys where it's like they've just been where they are for a long time, I think they can, but I don't expect it. With Green, I actually think there's possibly more room for growth in terms of what he can do as like either a run defender or just in terms of overall strength or just in terms of his overall player. I mean, again, this is a guy who's a wide receiver recruit, and he led college football in sacks like 2 years later. That's nuts, man. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's true.
And
he did run someone over at the Senior Bowl too. So
he did run someone over at the Senior Bowl. So he's I guess that's that maybe the power can eventually come to his game. I will say, like, one thing I do love to see in prospects, and I guess this is like kind of hard to track in terms of how it plays out. For developmental guys or just for anybody, love to see improvement over the course of their college career. Yeah. Did they get better? Did they grow during their time in college? Because sometimes you'll get a player where it's like, okay, this dude is a developmental guy, but he's been the same guy for like 4 years or whatever, Especially like sometimes the Panthers will draft a guy and I'm like, this is a developmental guy and he'll be 23, and it's like he's not gotten any better in college for like the last 3 years. It's like, okay, well, guess what? Like, he's probably not going to develop at the NFL level. And sometimes it can feel like coaches are just like, well, I love this guy's tools and I can do it. With Green, it's just been so new to him, and it's I think his game could even stand to have some more setting up, like I said earlier. And there's no reason to feel like that couldn't come with someone who hasn't even played the position for more than like 2 seasons. So,
yeah, I can see that. Yeah, he was a wide receiver recruit, and he did show some power at the Senior Bowl. I don't know how much stock to put in that rep, but it happened. So
it did happen. It's on tape.
A lot.
I do have him at 4 still. I put him above Pearce because I just don't I don't know what Pearce will look like at all. Like I was like, he deserves a spot in my starting 5, but I just am like, this is skill set's too weird. At least with Green, I think I know what I'm getting.
Yeah, no, I kind of feel the same way. So the guys we have left, we're sitting at an hour 20 right now. We've got Nick Scantron, or Scorton, I think is how we decided his name is pronounced, is Nick Scorton. Jack Sawyer and JTT are kind of the big 3 left. There's also Donovan, another name I can't pronounce. I'm not even going to try this one.
As in, I watched some of him. I forget how to pronounce it. I won't lie. I'm just not even going to try.
Just call him Boston College.
Boston College.
Boston College is he's okay. I watched one game of him when I was deciding if I should watch more of him to talk about him in a top 5 scenario, and I didn't like him enough to give you the full rundown because I was just going to make a starting 5 for this.
That's fair.
But he did have, like, he was interesting at least. Like, he had his swims and, like, he was trying the bull rush. Like, it seemed like there was kind of a lot that he was trying, which I appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
I have the most to say about JTT.
Okay, I was about to say.
He was the one I almost
put the Ohio State guy
in my top 5.
Well, he's actually ranked consensus lower than Sawyer right now.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, because Sawyer made the play in the... Yeah, that checks out.
I mean,
who do you think is better?
I think it's pretty damn close. I honestly, to come with a ranking, I don't have a strong opinion about that, I'm afraid. I have more thoughts on Sawyer than I do on JTT, so why don't you talk about JTT?
JTT is cool, and he has good ideas of how to beat the guy in front of him, I think, and he's creative with it, and his hand fighting is as good as anybody's in this class, I feel like. It just all kind of happens slowly, I think. Like, he doesn't have that electric first step, like, downhill attacking body type and mentality that you come to expect from kind of these top edges. But he does a bunch of cool things. Like, I think they send more chip help his way than Sawyer's way, I think. And, like, there were times where, like, you know, he'd string the move together to beat the halfback or whoever it was, and then, like, immediately turn that into his rush to beat the tackle. And, like, I'd be like, man, that's super cool. It took 5 seconds for him to do, though. Like, he just doesn't have that first step or that speed or that power that really, like, lets you win quickly. But, like, if you're a quarterback and you're holding it and you're scanning the field, like, he's going to find a way to get to you. And against the run, like, he's going to find a way to get your hands off of him and make the tackle. So he's cool. And I like the way he drops into coverage too, for kind of like a bigger guy. Like, he's really good dropping back. And I think he's smart. And I think he's a good winning football player for me. But he just doesn't have some of the traits for an edge that I think are conducive for being, like, a really scary matchup for a tackle. He's like almost like a watered down, like, Latu from last year. Like, Latu I loved and still love, like, but he didn't have the craziest first step, and he wasn't, like, the biggest, fastest, strongest guy, right? He was just, like, this mastermind pass rushing. Right. I think JTT, I mean, I think he's even slower than Latu was, and I think his moves aren't as good.
He's not as quick as Latu.
No, not at all. Like, Latu was a blur in some respects of his game, even if it wasn't that first step. But, JTT kind of has that tool where it's like he'll figure out a way to get there, and he's more polished, I think, than a lot of the edges you see coming out of school in terms of the complexity of his game. So I liked him. But I wanted to see more power. I wanted to see more just, dunking on people,
I mean, I totally agree about the IQ stuff. I think he reads things out. He reads things out incredibly well. Somebody who is, like, always, I feel like, breaking up screens or whatever. He's had a lot of big moments for OSU doing that type of stuff. I remember, his first game against Penn State. And if you watch OSU, you know which one I'm talking about. And he had the pick he almost had against Notre Dame doing the same stuff. He's very, very good at that type of stuff. But I agree. I just don't think he's a level of, like, explosive edge athlete to be someone where it's like, how can we possibly win against how can we possibly defend this guy? And on some levels, I kind of feel the same about Jack Sawyer.
I think Jack Sawyer's worse at it. Like,
Sawyer does not have great get off, and he doesn't have great bend or speed overall.
Right.
And that really limits him, not only in terms of, like, what moves are available in his arsenal, but just, like, how quickly he can get things done, like you were saying. Because some of these guys, I'm like, you're good, but you don't get it. It's got to be done so fast.
Yeah.
And like, half a second is the difference between sometimes like, a super slow quarterback and a super fast quarterback in terms of like how they're getting it out, right?
Yeah.
Now, Sawyer is very strong and he's good against the run. And he can be a true anchor and like he's very smart as well. So those things help him. But if he's going to be somebody who is consistently winning all of the time, it's going to have to be through like true hand fighting victories. And sometimes like he has great moments with that. Sometimes like he times things up perfectly. He either can like land the first punch or he can punch away the first punch and then he's got you. And that's kind of what happened against Texas, of course, when he had his big play. But at other times it feels like he can, if there's somebody there who is sort of winning that chess match against him, he can get taken out of the pass rushing game at times. OSU, for a lot of the season, or not even a lot of the season, but for a lot of Jack Sawyer's and JT's tenure, was underperforming in terms of their sack numbers. And I think these guys are great, and I think they probably still grade out well, but I do think that kind of speaks to them as players a little bit because they were both 5 stars.
Yeah.
Well, I do think I might like Sawyer a little bit more.
Okay.
I do think at the end of the day,
I
do think at the end of the day, his production was pretty good down the stretch for OSU. And I also think that he's got both these guys have some great feel for the game. I mean, it's a shame that it didn't end up going down as a legendary play, but his pick against Michigan to fade off and go back and grab that thing was awesome.
Yeah.
Both these guys need to be corners, man.
Okay.
I'm saying.
No, hold on. Can I propose an idea for you?
Yes.
I wasn't sure about this until like until we went to like the Super Bowl. We talked to the guy and we kind of looked at his backstory a little bit. Give me the Zach Bond transition for Jack Sawyer.
Sawyer, how much does he weigh? He's 260.
He's 260. He's kind of a big boy. I think he could get it done. I think he could get it done.
I don't think
Jack Sawyer. I'm sending my number 3 vertical, and I don't think Jack Sawyer's running with me like Zach Bond.
I'm afraid not.
I don't think he's making a PBU on a crosser 25 yards downfield like Zach Bond can.
Maybe not, but I don't know. There's something about him, man. Some movement patterns that
Some movement patterns. I think. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about Sawyer. He's so stiff.
But I will say
he is very stiff.
He's very
but his pass
stiff.
rush win rate was very good this year. He was winning a lot.
Him and JTT combined for like 25 sacks this year.
Caleb Downs stat.
Caleb Downs stat.
It's a.
I don't know.
stat.
I'm just saying things.
I don't know. I think I might like Sawyer a little bit more. I read this comparison about him and I kind of agree. He's kind of like Sam Hubbard.
Yeah.
Sawyer. He's kind of Sam Hubbard-y.
Okay.
Sam Hubbard might be the worst edge I watched this year.
Sam Hubbard used to be better.
He used to be better. He did used to be better.
This is Sam Hubbard's starting to get. I mean, Sam Hubbard's got to be over 30 now, right?
I don't know, but the things Lamar Jackson did to him this year,
It was
like he should retire after what Lamar did.
Look, it's old man Hubbard
games.
you're gonna hate on.
Yes.
Yeah, he's 29.
29, and it's mega over.
He's from Cincinnati. We are forgiving him.
That's tough. Yeah, he's 20.
Sorry,
Jack Sawyer's, he's 22, going on 23. So he's got, 6 years in him before he turns into this version of Sam Hubbard.
Sam Hubbard comp is like an automatic 4th round grade for me. After what I saw.
I don't know. The one thing that I definitely like, Sawyer's production this year does give me some pause because he was going up against top talent and he was successful and he made big time plays and big time moments.
He did. So did Hubbard.
So did Hubbard.
Hey,
That's
in
true.
the Ravens game.
So did Bond.
He is not Zach Bond.
Yeah.
He's Zach Bond.
Tell me, look at his interception against Michigan and look at Bond's interception in the Super Bowl. Tell me they don't look
It's not it's the watch Zach Bond run with Evan Ingram on a crosser and get the PBU.
Yeah, I don't know if Sawyer's doing all that.
Yeah, and I think Bond was like really twitchy. Like he was.
Yeah, you'd have to be more fluid than Sawyer. I do think also we sometimes tend to underrate these pure power rushers who can just win in terms of hand fighting. And sort of just like landing the first punch correctly or punching away hands and then making something happen from there. So I don't want to make it out that I'm too low on Sawyer. But at the same time, I've seen him most places around like edge like 10. Except for I think PFF is crazy high on him or something. Yeah,
PFF
like a first
has
rounder.
him as...
And most of the time I'm like, yeah, I kind of see what you're saying. As good as Sawyer played down the stretch, as many big plays as he made down the stretch, I can't deny that for a lot of his Ohio State career, it was like waiting for him to really start to make those plays. But I guess I don't know. I guess his pressure numbers have always been good. He's a guy I maybe need to like sit down and closely examine more than I have now, even though he's a Buckeye.
PFF has Sawyer as their edge 6 and JTT as their edge 11 on their big board. But they usually they'll release articles with like different rankings than what's on their big board sometimes. So, because the big board will like stay the same since like August. So, to be fair. But is there anyone else we want to talk about before we get out here? Sitting like
not in this episode. I think we might have to do a part 2.
Part 2
later.
There's just too many guys. But we will come back. We'll probably do some film reviews on other guys. Again, like Matt said, if you want to watch the film review we did on Mike Green, go ahead and check that out on the Stay Hot YouTube channel. But until next time, thank you all so much for tuning in. We're excited to get into more draft content, excited to do some off-season planning, find ways to make the Panthers, Browns, and Packers all Super Bowl contenders next year. But until then, as always, from Corn Boy, Bird Boy, and Lemon Boy, we will catch you on the flippity flop.